Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. I want to reiterate that. I want to repeat what Rabbi Timoner just said. Yashter Koach, Bailey and Alexa, it is really a treat to be with you and to learn with you this morning. And I'm honored to be able to respond to some of what you just taught us. Vayeishev Yaakov, be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And Jacob settled in the land where his father had journeyed, the land of Canaan. With these words, the Torah sets the stage this week for Jacob's middle age. Vayeishev Yaakov, he settled. The verb cues us to imagine a newly sedentary life for Jacob after all the moving around he does in Genesis. In previous weeks, we've read of Jacob's youthful mischief and his complicated relationships with his father and brother. We've seen how he ends up having children with 4 separate women and how he wrestles with an angel and gets renamed. But after all that drama, Vayeishev Yaakov, Jacob settled down. Almost immediately, the Parsha starts talking about his children, which may or may not be the ultimate symbol of Jacob settling down. And as you each taught us, Alexa and Bailey, Jacob did not always make the best parenting choices, given his obvious preference for Joseph above the rest. Alexa, you invited us to consider what made Joseph special among his brothers, whether it was because of his intelligence or unique physical resemblance to his dad, or it was perhaps his relationship to his mother, whom Jacob loved most. It's obvious that Joseph was set apart. Never mind that he had a legitimate claim to being special, his father didn't need to treat him with such favoritism. And Bailey, you agree. My guess is that most Benot and B'nai Mitzvah would also agree and say it's not good for one sibling to get special treatment, all the more so when you're identical twins. But Bailey, you also gave us a way forward, pointing out that Joseph might have been able to turn the tides of his ancestral trauma. He eventually stops the cycle. He's kind to his brothers when they meet again in Egypt, more or less, and Joseph's sons are the first example in the Torah of brothers who don't have conflict. May all of us be like Joseph in this reading, working hard to forgive and to break cycles of trauma in our lives. But Vayeishev Yaakov, Jacob settles for less in this week's reading. In Tractate Sanhedrin, the rabbis of the Talmud find deep meaning in this single verb, Vayeishev. Rabbi Yochanan says, everywhere that it says Vayeishev, and he dwelt, it is nothing other than an expression of pain, of impending calamity. The Talmud gives us a few examples to prove this point. And Israel dwelt in Shittim in Numbers 25, leading the people to behave sinfully with the daughters of Moab. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in Genesis 47, followed immediately by a description of Israel Jacob's death. Another example comes from the book of Kings about Israel and Judah dwelling safely, only thereafter to be pursued by an Edomite king. And of course, our rabbis draw our attention to this verse too. Jacob dwelled in the land where his father journeyed, only to encounter the pain of his children's behavior. Perhaps Jacob felt that when he settled down in the land that his fathers had known, he was doing something comfortable and familiar. But that comfortable choice may also have led him to make the same mistakes that his own parents made. And indeed, this seems to be so. Comfort may not have been a good thing for Jacob because it allowed him to get complacent. And we have little evidence to suggest that he even wanted to stop negative cycles that he had inherited from his forebears. He may have famously wrestled with God and man, but Jacob may also have settled into merely accepting the painful emotional legacy of his parents. Whenever any of us are confronted with something painful that began when we were kids, we generally want to be like Joseph in this reading, the wise and prophetic and beautiful son who's able to set things straight for himself and for his family, at least when it comes to his adult choice to end the family dynamic into which he was born. But more often than not, we end up being like Jacob, the well-intentioned son and father who couldn't help but make some of the same mistakes that his own parents made. It's not all bad, of course, and things basically turn out okay in the end for his family. But Jacob endures so much pain throughout his adult life, grappling with his son Joseph's supposed death. And it may be that he kind of did it to himself by not doing the work of looking inward, analyzing his own subconscious, maybe his dreams for that matter, and making new choices the way that Joseph might have. In one midrash from Bereshit Rabbah, the rabbis seem to agree. Like the Talmudic sages, they use the word Vayeishev to teach that though Jacob wanted to live tranquilly in the land, he would soon encounter trouble on account of Joseph. Pairing this with verses from the book of Job, the rabbis explain that whenever a righteous person wishes to live comfortably, God asks them, is it not enough that you'll live comfortably in the world to come, that you need also to live comfortably in this world? I like to imagine that in this moment, God isn't just referring to a mythic world after this one, but rather that the world to come is kind of like self-actualization at some point in the future in this life. And we might imagine that there is a world that is better in which we can reach our potential in that world to come. We might paraphrase God's response here as if to say to Jacob, why must you seek comfort in the here and now when you'll have even greater comfort, happiness after reaching your full potential in the future? Why not dig deeper? To be clear, everyone deserves comfort and tranquility in their lives. And it's not always virtuous to do the hard thing. But this rabbinic version of Jacob offers a cautionary tale in what happens when we don't try to lean into what's hard, when we don't probe and we don't do the work of seeing how our lives sometimes follow old scripts that don't suit us. And in those cases, sometimes we make ancient mistakes. Instead, we can at least try to do the hard work of figuring out how to end bad cycles and live better lives. Even in the darkest of times, surely we can find a little bit of light if we try. We can right the wrongs in our lives that feel biblical, so long as we don't settle for less. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.